One of the things that I try to do on Mediabuzz, on the other Fox programs I'm on, in the column that I write for foxnews.com, and maybe just sounding off on Twitter and Facebook as well, is to hold journalists accountable. On the one hand, I like to praise good journalism and good performances. I said, for example, that CBS's John Dickerson did a very good job as the chief moderator in the Democratic debate. And I've also said that the Fox Business moderators did a very good job, Maria Bartiromo, as well as Neil Cavuto and Jerry Baker, the editor of the Wall Street Journal, in the Republican debate in Milwaukee. And when somebody screws up big time, for example, the Rolling Stone piece of fiction about the alleged gang rape at the University of Virginia, which clearly never happened. We named the person who wrote that piece, Sabrina Erdely, and examined how she could have made all these mistakes and why the editors went along with it. We don't always do that, and that prompted an email from Robert M., who says, when there is an obvious damaging error in reporting by the mainstream liberal media, we conservatists blindly blame it on simply, quote, the media, soon to be forgotten. The media are made up of persons, and some author wrote that erroneous article and is personally responsible. When calling the error to the public's attention, why do we not routinely expose that author by name, not just the nameless media? And that's a good point. And when somebody really screws up, we ought to tell you who that is. Now, sometimes if the reporters are lesser known and it's not a huge screw up, I may just say this happened in the Washington Post, this happened in an online piece on CNN, or it happened in a magazine, Time Magazine, Rolling Stone, you name it. But more often than not, especially for somebody who's in the media critique business, I mean, it is my responsibility to tell you who did this, but there's one caveat here. Journalists who work for news organizations, whether they're writers, reporters, whether they are reporters for television, whether they're, as long as they work for an organization that has a structure and has bosses and has editors or producers who have to review their work, they are not solely responsible when they screw up. Sure, they bear a big part of the responsibility, but then you have to ask, how did such and such a news channel or local station or news network put this on the air? How did the editors of Rolling Stone publish the bogus UVA story? How did the editors of the Washington Post or the New York Times or the LA Times or USA Today, the Chicago Tribune, how did they allow a biased piece of reporting or one with obvious holes or based on unnamed sources that are taking cheap shots at others, how did they allow that to be published? So there is some collective responsibility unless you're an independent columnist or a blogger who doesn't report to anybody. So I think it's important, yes, to name the people who screw up, to also credit the people who do good reporting and good journalism, but also to keep in mind that when there is a news organization and there are bosses who are supposed to review the work before it is published, whether it's broadcast, whether it's carried on radio, whether it's published online or published in a print publication, they too bear some of the responsibility.